hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our powerful health tips.
On the night I finished wrapping the last gift for my grandchildren, my phone buzzed, and with one sentence, my heart cracked in half. "You won't be joining us. Rebecca wants to keep it just her family." I stared at the glowing screen, unsure if I was reading it right. The refrigerator hummed softly behind me, the only sound in the kitchen. For a moment, I thought maybe it was a mistake, a message meant for someone else. But then I saw his name, David, my son, my only child. The words didn't come with anger or even explanation, just a statement, clean, cold, and final. I looked around the kitchen, the counters lined with neatly labeled travel bags, one for each grandchild. I'd packed sunscreen, coloring books, little seashell keychains that said Santa 2024. Grandma loves you. I had planned every detail for 3 years, saving every dollar I could spare since Charles passed. Now I was apparently just the woman who paid for it. I sat down at the table and placed my phone face down. My hands trembled, sticky, from tape and tears I hadn't yet shed. I wanted to call him. I wanted to ask, "David, how can you say that to me?" But a small, sharp voice inside said, "Don't." Because he already knew. I replayed his message again and again. "You won't be joining us. Rebecca wants to keep it just her family." The phrasing stung more with each read. Just her family. Not ours. Not mine. Her family. As if I were an extra guest in the life I created. I had felt this coming. Little by little. The first time Rebecca corrected me at the dinner table. The way she'd glance at me when I told old stories about Charles like I was embarrassing her. The holidays that slowly migrated to her mother's house with invitations sent the night before, if at all. But this was different. This was a razor with punctuation. I could almost hear Rebecca's voice in David's text, measured, polite, always just a bit too smooth. "It's simpler this way," she'd probably told him. "It's not personal. Not personal." The favorite phrase of people who wound you on purpose. I pushed back from the table and walked to the sink. The window over it looked out onto the small backyard Charles had once called his kingdom. The bird bath he'd installed was still there, chipped and mossy. The water sat still as glass. I used to imagine him out there, waving at me from the garden, telling me to turn off the light to come sit with him. Now I imagine nothing. When I turned back toward the table, my eyes landed on the souvenir bags again. Each one was a piece of me. Small, kind, invisible work. I'd even checked the forecast for Florida that week, making sure the kids would have sun hats and cool water bottles. Rebecca had never once said thank you. Not once. I remembered the last Thanksgiving at their house, when I offered to bring my pecan pie, the same recipe David used to beg for as a boy. Rebecca smiled and said, "Oh, that's okay. My mom's already baking one, but maybe you can bring napkins." Napkins? It was such a small thing, yet it had felt like a slap. Just like this text now. Another polite exclusion, wrapped in good manners. I picked up my phone again. My reflection in the black screen looked older than I remembered, tired. My hair, once dark like Charles's, had faded into soft silver. I tried to picture how David saw me now, a grandmother, maybe a burden. But I also remembered the little boy who drew me a picture in 2nd grade, a cape fluttering behind me, the words, "My mom saves the day." When did I stop being the hero in his story? I scrolled through old photos, birthdays, beach trips, his wedding. In every one, I was standing a little farther from the center, smiling a little smaller. It had been happening gradually, like the tide pulling sand away from under my feet. You don't notice at first. You just keep standing there until you realize you're sinking. I set the phone down again, harder this time. My eyes burned, but I refused to cry. I had spent too many nights crying for people who mistook my love for convenience. "Not invited," I whispered, testing how it sounded in the air. It tasted bitter, and the house was too quiet. I turned off the kitchen light, leaving only the soft glow under the cabinets. The shadows stretched long across the floor. I sat there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock. Every sound felt louder than usual, as if the house itself was holding its breath with me. I thought about all the small sacrifices that had led to this moment. The dinners I skipped out on to save for the trip. The online tutoring sessions I took, squinting at my laptop long after midnight. The evenings when my friends went out and I stayed home, telling myself it would all be worth it when I saw the kids playing in the Florida sand. Now that image was gone, replaced by another. Rebecca standing at the shoreline, laughing, holding one of my grandchildren's hands, maybe wearing one of the sun hats I bought, and me sitting at home, forgotten. The resentment curled in my chest, heavy and alive. It wasn't fiery anger. It was colder than that, like ice pressing down on my ribs. Every word from that text echoed in my head, sharp and deliberate. Every small humiliation I'd swallowed over the years surfaced one by one until they formed a single, undeniable truth. They didn't see me anymore. I opened my notebook, the one I kept by the phone. On the first blank page, I wrote a single line. It ends tonight. Not the love, but the waiting. Not the family, but the pretending. I didn't know yet what I would do, only that I wouldn't be the silent giver anymore. I had built this family with my hands, my money, my time, and if they could so easily cut me out, I could learn to live without them, too. The refrigerator hummed again. The clock ticked once, twice, and somewhere in that stillness, I felt the faintest shift inside me. Not anger, not grief, but resolve. I reached out and pulled the souvenir bags toward me. One by one, I untied the ribbons and took out the keychains. The words, Grandma loves you, glinted under the dim light. I placed them neatly in a small bowl on the counter, like tiny reminders of what love used to feel like before it became a transaction. Outside, the wind brushed against the window pane. The sound was soft, almost kind, and for the first time that night, I let myself imagine a world where I didn't have to beg for a seat at my own table. I didn't know it then, but something had already begun to change. The text that broke my heart had also opened a door, one that would soon lead me somewhere far from this kitchen, far from their rejection, and closer to something I had long forgotten, my own strength. Morning came slow, gray and heavy. I hadn't slept much, and when I did, I dreamed of standing on a beach, calling out for my family while they walked away, pretending not to hear me. The sound of rain on the window pulled me back to reality. My phone still sat face down on the table where I'd left it. The message from David, waiting like a bruise I didn't want to touch. I made myself a cup of coffee, though it tasted like nothing. The house felt too still, as if it was holding its breath with me. I told myself to get busy. That was what Charles used to say when something hurt too much to think about. Do something, Eleanor. Busy hands calm the heart. So I walked to my little home office, the same place I used to grade papers back when I was teaching English. The desk was cluttered with bills, a half-used notepad, and my old laptop. It took a few tries to start up. The hum of the fan filling the silence. The screen light felt harsh against the gray light from the window. I clicked on the folder labeled Florida Trip. It was all there. The receipts, booking confirmations, and checklists I'd been building for months, flights for 8 people, villa reservations, car rentals, everything paid for with my travel fund. I had created that account the day I retired, calling it my Florida Dream Fund. I thought it was clever back then. Now the name felt foolish. When I opened the banking app, the number appeared 21 of 163 to 84. That was the total I had saved before the payment started going through. Every time I saw that number, I remembered the little choices that built it. Saying no to dinner out, canceling the cable plan, tutoring students online until my eyes burned. I even stopped buying the fancy tea I liked. All for this trip for them. And now they were going without me. I stared at my name on the screen. Account owner Eleanor Grace Miller. Beneath it, authorized users. None. I read those words over and over. It was the first time in weeks that something made me feel steady again. This was mine, not theirs, not Rebecca's. Mine. The bitterness crept back, sharp and quiet. Every time I thought of Rebecca's voice, soft, polite, and firm, I could feel my stomach tighten. The last call we'd had still echoed in my head. She'd said, "Eleanor, you do so much already. You really should rest. This trip will be a lot for you." She said it like she was concerned, but I heard what she meant. "You're in the way." That memory burned more now that I understood the truth. She hadn't been protecting me. She'd been planning to cut me out. I thought of how she'd talk over me at family dinners, finishing my sentences like I was too slow. How she'd take the phone from my grandkids when I was reading to them over video chat, saying, "Okay, say goodbye to Grandma now," before I was ready. At first, I used to tell myself she was just trying to help. But help doesn't feel like erasing. It feels like partnership. What she did felt like being slowly pushed out of the frame. And David, my sweet boy who once made me Mother's Day cards with construction paper hearts, he stood by and let it happen. That was what hurt most. The coffee had gone cold. I pushed it aside and leaned back in my chair. My hands were trembling a little, but not from sadness this time. It was something else, something steadier. I looked at the travel fund again. The button that said "Freeze Account" glowed faintly on the screen. I hovered the mouse over it, not ready to click, just curious. A small note popped up. "Freezing the account will pause all connected transactions." All of them. I didn't press it. Not yet. I wasn't ready for that kind of decision. But for the first time since reading David's message, I felt a small piece of control returning. I could almost hear Rebecca's voice again saying in that smooth way of hers, "It's not personal, Eleanor." But it was, it always had been. Every dismissal, every sidelong glance, every polite, maybe, "next time." It all added up to this moment. Me sitting here realizing I'd built a trip meant to heal us, and they'd turned it into a vacation without me. I closed the laptop for a minute and looked around the room. The shelves still held photos of family trips long past. Yellowstone, Lake Tahoe, the Oregon coast. In every photo I was smiling, holding David's hand. I wondered when the last picture of us together had been taken. 2 years, maybe 3. It felt longer. The resentment sat heavy in my chest, but under it was something new. Clarity. For years, I had let myself believe that being generous meant being loved. I thought if I just gave enough, planned enough, made everything easy, they'd see me. But giving had only made me invisible. When I opened the laptop again, the banking page was still there waiting. I didn't click anything. I just stared at my name on that account. My proof that I hadn't given everything away. The number, the balance, the ownership, it all represented something bigger than money. It was the last piece of myself that hadn't been taken for granted. I didn't know yet what I would do, but I knew this. I wasn't going to be their silent wallet anymore. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle. The clouds were parting just enough for a bit of light to slip through. I took a slow breath and whispered into the quiet room, "Not this time." For the first time in a long while, the words didn't feel like a wish. They felt like a promise. The morning of their flight arrived bright and cold. I woke before sunrise, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't sleep. My hands ached from tension, and my mind replayed every small moment that had led me here. The last dinner we'd shared together, when Rebecca had accidentally forgotten to set a place for me until I pointed it out. The way David had brushed it off with a quiet, "Mom, don't make it a big deal." The way she smiled across the table like she'd won something. Every memory landed, heavier than the one before it, stacking inside me until I could barely breathe. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the faint glow of my laptop screen. The travel account page was still open, just as I'd left it. The cursor blinked beside the words "Freeze Account." I hovered my mouse over it, but didn't press. Not yet. I wanted to feel sure. Not just angry, but absolutely certain. Outside, the world was waking up, and somewhere across town, they were probably loading their luggage into a car, laughing about how early it was. The thought made my stomach turn. I had paid for those suitcases. I'd bought the plane tickets, reserved the villa, arranged the rental car, even called ahead about meal preferences for Rebecca's parents. I paid for everything, but they still asked me to stay home. That thought hit hard, and I felt my hand tremble slightly on the mouse. I could almost hear Rebecca's voice in my mind, sweet and condescending, the way she'd said last month. "Eleanor, we appreciate everything. You do. Really, you're just so generous." At the time, I thought it was gratitude. Now I knew better. It was dismissal dressed as politeness. When I opened my text messages, there they were. David's unread messages from the night before. "Mom, we're heading to Seattle early. Thanks again for everything." Not a single word about me going with them. Not even a wish you were coming. I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind that comes when pain finally burns itself out. I clicked the refresh button. On my banking app, everything was still active. The next payment, a large one to the villa, was scheduled for 8:15 a.m. I checked the clock, 8:12. I didn't hesitate this time. I pressed freeze account. A small confirmation box appeared asking, "Are you sure you want to pause all transactions?" I clicked yes. The message changed to "All linked cards have been disabled." I exhaled slowly and closed my eyes. The sound of the refrigerator filled the silence again, steady and low. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, lighting the edge of the counter. For the first time in days, I didn't feel powerless. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. I didn't need to look to know who it was. David. Then again, then again. Each vibration hit like a heartbeat I didn't want to feel. Finally, I flipped the phone over. "Mom, something's wrong with the card. They say the payment isn't going through." Another message. "Can you check the travel account? It keeps declining." I didn't respond. I didn't even open the messages fully. I watched them pile up one after another, each one a tiny echo of the words that had broken me just days before. "You won't be joining us now." They were asking for my help again. Not my company, just my money. By 8:40, the calls began. First one, then another. I let them ring. I stared at the phone vibrating on the table, thinking about all the times I'd answered before when they needed a babysitter. When Rebecca wanted advice on a recipe, when David needed help covering his mortgage that one winter, I'd always answered, always said yes, always fixed what they broke. But not this time. The ringing stopped, replaced by a voicemail notification. Then another. My hands shook as I picked up the phone and pressed play. David's voice came through shaky and rushed. "Mom, it's me. We're at the airport and they won't let us check in. The card's not working. Please call me back." I could hear Rebecca in the background. Her tone clipped, irritated, not scared. "Tell her to fix it, David. Just tell her to fix it." The resentment that had been sitting like a stone in my chest shifted, then no longer heavy, but sharp. Hearing her voice, the same calm authority she used when cutting me out of plans, made something inside me harden. I thought of all those times she'd smiled through me at family dinners, of the times she'd told the kids, "Grandma's just tired." When I tried to join in their games, I could have answered that call. I could have said, "Now you know how it feels to be left out." But instead, I set the phone back down. I chose silence, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. And then something unexpected happened. My youngest granddaughter's voice came through in a voicemail next. "Grandma, we're going to see the ocean. Daddy says there's turtles. I wish you were coming." Her little voice cracked my heart open in a way nothing else could. For a moment, I almost caved. I almost reached for the phone to fix it all. But I didn't, because this wasn't about punishment. It was about boundaries, about finally saying no, even when it hurt. By 9:15, the resort sent me an email. Reservation canceled. Refund processed, one line, simple and clean, like the text that started it all. But this time, the power belonged to me. I stared at those words and felt something rise in my chest. Relief mixed with sorrow, mixed with freedom. The calls eventually stopped. The house grew quiet again. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the sky turn from gray to pale blue. Somewhere miles away, they were standing at that airport counter trying to understand what had gone wrong. Maybe they'd blame the airline. Maybe they'd blame me. It didn't matter anymore. I could have yelled. I could have written back with all the things I'd kept inside for years. But I chose not to because silence this time wasn't weakness. It was strength. As I took my first sip of tea, I whispered to myself, let them learn what it feels like when love stops being easy to take. And the words didn't sound bitter. They sounded like peace. It had been 2 weeks since the airport call stopped. For the first time in months, I could sit in my kitchen without feeling like the air was heavy. The travel fund, now full again, glowed like quiet proof that I had done something right. But even with that calm, I still caught myself thinking about their faces when the cards were declined. The part of me that had spent a lifetime saying yes still wondered if I'd gone too far. Then I'd remember Rebecca's voice in the background that morning, sharp, irritated, not once saying my name, only tell her to fix it. That single sentence had burned into my mind. Not Mom, not Eleanor, just her. I had stopped being a person to her long before that trip. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I saw the keychains again, the ones that were supposed to go to the kids. I picked one up and traced the small silver letters. Grandma loves you. My chest ached, but not from sadness this time. It was something closer to clarity. I wanted to do something with the money that meant something again, something that reminded me I still had kindness to give, just not to people who treated it like an obligation. That night, I took out my old church directory. I started writing down names. Carolyn, June, Teresa, Margaret, Helen, and Leah. All women I'd known for years, but rarely saw outside of Sunday service. Each of them had their own kind of loneliness. Caroline's son moved across the country and barely called. June lost her husband last winter. Teresa cared for her sick sister full-time. Margaret's daughter only visited on Mother's Day. Helen had stopped driving after her stroke, and Leah had told me she hadn't seen the ocean since she was a girl. I sat there staring at their names, realizing that all of us had been forgotten in one way or another. The idea came to me so easily. It felt like it had been waiting. I would take them all to Florida, the same villa, the same trip, but this time it would belong to people who actually appreciated it. The next morning, I called the travel agency. The same woman answered, cheerful as ever. Mrs. Miller, we're so sorry about what happened with your last booking. Are you ready to rescue? I almost laughed. Yes, I said, but not for the same group. As I gave her the new names, I felt something lift from my chest. Every name was a little act of defiance, a quiet declaration that I could choose who deserved my care. When the agent confirmed the new booking, I sat back in my chair and whispered, this time it's mine. The resentment I'd carried toward Rebecca and David didn't vanish overnight. It still came in waves, especially when I thought about the way Rebecca had smiled while cutting me out of my own plans. That polite smile that said, I'm in control now. I realized she'd been trying to push me out for years, and I had made it easy by trying too hard to be accepted. But when the day came for our trip, everything felt different. I met the women at the airport, 6 faces full of disbelief and joy. Caroline hugged me so tight I thought she'd never let go. You mean it? She asked. We're really going. Yes, I told her. We're really going. The flight was peaceful. No tension, no forced small talk, no quiet competition for control. When we arrived at the villa on Santal Island, the air smelled like salt and sunlight. The view from the balcony took my breath away. I thought of Charles and the first time. We'd been there together, sitting on the same kind of porch, laughing about nothing. I had brought his photo with me, framed in softwood, and placed it on the dining table. For the first time since his passing, it didn't make me cry. It made me feel grounded, like he was quietly proud of me. That evening, we sat under string lights on the patio, the sound of the ocean just beyond the dunes. We ate simple food, nothing fancy. Fresh fruit, grilled fish, and a little wine. The women laughed easily. The kind of laughter that comes when no one feels like a burden. Carolyn told a story about her son's wedding that she wasn't invited to, and June reached over to hold her hand. No pity, no judgment, just understanding. We decided to light a candle for each of us, just one small flame to mark the moment. When it was my turn, I thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. I said, "You are not a burden. You are seen. You are enough." The others repeated the words quietly, almost like a prayer. Later that night, I walked alone along the beach. The waves were calm, the sand cool under my feet. I looked back at the villa, the windows glowing softly behind me. I thought of David and Rebecca then, not with anger, but with distance. They had taken enough from me already. This moment, this peace belonged to me. As I stood there, the moonlight reflected on the water, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not the kind that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes from choosing where your love goes. For the first time since Charles died, I wasn't waiting for anyone to make space for me. I had made my own. The first morning back home felt strange. The air in Portland was cool again, the kind that makes the windows fog when you brew coffee. My suitcase still sat half open by the front door, a small pile of sand-covered shoes beside it. The house smelled faintly of the plumeria lotion I'd brought back from Florida, soft and sweet, like a memory that refused to fade. For once, the silence didn't hurt. It just was. I poured myself a cup of coffee and looked at the stack of mail on the table. Bills, a grocery flyer, and one white envelope with familiar handwriting. The name on the return label made my chest tighten. David Miller. I didn't open it right away. I sat there for a while, tracing the edges of the envelope, letting the steam from my coffee rise between us like a curtain. I finally tore it open and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Inside was a printed email. I could tell. He hadn't even written it by hand. "Hi, Mom." It began. "We're back." The trip didn't go as planned. I let out a small, humorless laugh. "Of course it didn't." He went on. "We had to rebook a lot of things, and it got messy. Rebecca was really stressed. She says she didn't mean to exclude you like that. Maybe she just wanted the trip to feel simple. I think things got out of hand. Anyway, I've been thinking. Maybe we weren't fair to you." I could almost hear his voice as I read the words. Low, careful. The tone he used when he was trying to calm someone without ever admitting he was wrong. There was no apology. Not really. Just explanations dressed up to sound like regret. He continued. "The kids missed you. Olivia kept asking about the beach house you talked about. We told her maybe next time Grandma will come too. Let's try to talk soon. Okay. Love, David." The word love at the end looked smaller than the rest of the text. I stared at it, then set the paper down and leaned back in my chair. For a moment, all the feelings I thought I'd left behind on the beach came rushing back. The disbelief, the humiliation, the quiet anger that had grown from every polite insult and every cold smile Rebecca had given me. I remembered the last holiday we'd spent together before all this. Rebecca had decided to host Thanksgiving that year. When I offered to bring something, she smiled that same tight smile and said, "Oh, Ella, just relax this time. You've done enough." But when I arrived, she'd already used my stuffing recipe without asking and told everyone it was her mother's. I'd said nothing. I told myself it wasn't worth a scene. But moments like that, those small cutting actions, they build up until silence becomes its own kind of wound. Now, holding that letter, I realized they weren't asking for forgiveness. They were asking for comfort. They wanted me to smooth things over so they wouldn't have to face what they'd done. I could almost hear Rebecca's voice behind, David's words guiding them. "Say it nicely. She'll come around." I folded the letter neatly and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't need to reply. The part of me that had always rushed to fix things, to make peace, no matter the cost, was gone. What I felt now wasn't anger. It was distance. The kind of distance that comes when you finally stop chasing after people who've already decided to walk ahead without you. The clock on the wall ticked softly as I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. A few children rode their bikes down the street, laughing in the cold air. I thought about my trip, about Carolyn and the other women. I thought about our last night on the island, standing barefoot in the sand watching the tide roll in. The way we had all stood close together, not out of need, but out of understanding. I had seen something in their faces that night, a kind of light that only appears when pain finally turns into strength. I walked back to the kitchen table and opened my laptop. My screensaver was still a picture from the trip. All of us smiling under the string lights, plates of food half finished, laughter frozen midair. I clicked to enlarge it and let it fill the screen. That was the family I had now. Not by blood, but by choice. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel like someone's afterthought. I felt whole. The resentment that once consumed me had finally settled into something softer, a quiet reminder that love, when given to the right people, doesn't drain you. It fills you back up. I closed the laptop and took another sip of coffee. The bitterness didn't bother me this time. I looked around my kitchen at the same four walls that had once felt like a cage and smiled. I had built a new kind of life here, one that didn't depend on anyone's approval. As I reached to turn off the kitchen light, I whispered, "You can't lose what you've already let go of." The room went dim, and I felt peace in that darkness. If someone had told me months ago that I'd find happiness again, I wouldn't have believed them. But now I know the truth. Sometimes walking away isn't the end of the story. It's where it finally begins. And if you've ever been made to feel unwanted, remember this. You have the right to take back your story, to write the ending yourself. So tell it, live it, and never let anyone decide your worth for.
Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our powerful health tips. Thanks for watching.